Hello, everyone, and welcome to Smart Search. We are going to be starting the presentation. We still do have people coming into the room, but out of respect for everyone and your time, we're going to go ahead and get going. So again, welcome everyone to today's presentation. Our special guest presenter, Chris Voss, is going to be discussing negotiation skills for business professionals. Chris is the founder and CEO of the Black Swan Group Limited and author of the acclaimed book, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if Your Life Depended on It. Prior to 2008, Chris was the lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI, as well as their hostage negotiation representative for the National Security Council's Hostage Working Group. Chris is the recipient of the Attorney General's Award for Excellence in Law Enforcement and the FBI Agents Association Award for Distinguished and Exemplary Service. He teaches business negotiation in the MBA program as an adjunct professor at the University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business and at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business. Again, my name is Cindy Travella. I'm the Manager of Marketing at Smart Search and your Master of Ceremonies for today's presentation. Also joining us is my Smart Search colleague, Sylvia Dalby. Good morning, Sylvia.
Good morning, Cindy, and thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Thanks, Sylvia.
We already have a comment from Jeff, says that Chris was great on James Altshuler's podcast. So you have a highly anticipative audience here.
All right, very good.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. So just a couple of housekeeping things we want to cover with you. Chris is going to be addressing questions at the end of the presentation, but don't hesitate to key in your questions during the presentation itself. If you look over onto the panel, you'll see a section that says questions, and you can key those in there. Calling your attention to the GoToWebinar control panel, some of the other items you'll see there is a chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. If you experience any technical difficulties, you can alert me via the chat box. However, if you're experiencing technical problems with hearing or seeing the slides, best thing to do is exit out of the webinar entirely, re-enter the presentation, and that tends to solve the audio and visual problems. Also, there's a little white arrow in an orange box on the control panel that points to the right. If you click that arrow, it will minimize the control panel so you can see the entirety of the slides. And for best viewing, we do recommend you maximize your screen. You can also drag and drop the chat box and question box from the control panel if you wish, and remove it from the control panel prior to minimizing them. The presentation slides are going to be available to anyone in attendance, and additional information will be sent to all of you on how to obtain a copy. Also, if you want, you can tweet during the webinar at # SmartSearch ATS. And during today's webinar, Chris will be discussing the reason why yes is the last word you want to hear and what makes the word no a path to mutual agreement, the two sweetest words you want to hear during a negotiation, the four ways to say no and to keep the discussion positive, and how, if the negotiation is going sideways, you can turn it around to get a positive outcome. So without further ado, it is my extreme pleasure to hand off the controls to our special guest presenter, Chris Voss.
Thank you very much. It is an absolute pleasure to be here doing this today, and I hope this is going to be some fun, and I hope people will get some things out of it. And anybody that got the chance to catch me on James's podcast, that was cool. I had a lot of fun doing that. So for those of you maybe that are being introduced to me and some of these crazy ideas for the first time, I mean, you got to be asking yourself, you know, all right, so he talks to hostage negotiators and hostage takers and terrorists. I mean, what does that have to do with my life? You know, and I got to tell you, I think if you were to take the guns out of a typical bank robbery with hostages, you probably got a Monday morning staff meeting with the boss. I mean, there's so much going on in our regular lives Somebody, try negotiating with my 13-year-old daughter. You think you had it tough with hostage takers? What about my kids? Or what about some of my colleagues? So, what this really is it's emotional intelligence on steroids, if you will. Hostage negotiators, we started out figuring that whoever we were dealing with was going to be emotional, and we would be lucky if they would ever be rational. So we learn ways to try to cope with people when they're just intense. My brothers that are profilers with the FBI, made famous in the shows Criminal Minds and a couple of other shows like that. The profilers really just first got started saying that criminal behavior was just human behavior, and that homicides, which is what they first built their ideas around, was just intense human behavior. And so if the rules worked in intense behavior, they worked for regular behavior. So that's kind of what the approach we're taking in hostage negotiations. If it works for intense human behavior, then it works for less intense behavior also. We'll talk through some of those ideas. Now, the wackiest one, I think, the craziest idea, which we really got into a lot. All right, I'm trying to advance there we go. And I'll have to tell you that when I teach at USC and Georgetown these days, when I put this slide up, I have to tell my students that this is not a picture of me in a bathrobe with long hair and a beard. This is from old Charlton Heston movie, Moses Bringing Down the Laws, written on the stone tablets from the top of the mountain. But I love to ask people this crazy question: if yes is success, then what is no? Because we believe that yes is success. And the most famous negotiating book in the world, and one everybody knows, is Getting to Yes. And yes is one of the most beautiful words in the English language, if not the most beautiful word in any language. We love to hear it. It's such music to our ears. So if yes is success, then what is no? And I got to tell you, that's a set-up question. Like most questions, but particular questions that I ask, because, who says yes is success? And that really catches people off guard. And one of the things that really sold my book more than anything else, when I was working on it, one of the guys I was working on drafts with, he said, hey, Chris, as a hostage negotiator, what did you guys do to get hostage takers to say yes? How did you get them to say yes? And that was the only question that I can remember anybody that I worked with that they asked me that I was completely caught off guard. It completely stumped me, because I said, we never did. I don't think we ever try to get people to say yes, because it's irrelevant. Now, how in the world can yes be irrelevant? Well, there's three kinds of yeses. So what are the three kinds, you might ask yourself? I thought there was just one. There's commitment, confirmation, and counterfeit. And we are so used to being trapped by the commitment yes, the confirmation yes leading to the commitment, that we give the counterfeit. And we love yes so much, and we want to hear it so much, that we get completely taken hostage by it. And I think that's what, and because we love it so much, we want to hear it, and we're desperate for it in any given interaction. A mistake a lot of people make is, as soon as they hear yes, they don't want to listen to anything else, because they're just dying for it, they're just waiting for it. They want to hear it, and then as soon as they hear it, then they run from the negotiation. They want to leave the room, they want to leave the table as soon as they have a deal. So the way this gets turned on us on a regular basis is there's something called mere agreement. And if you can get somebody to say yes to the little things, and get them to keep saying yes, and the little stuff like, do you want to make more money? Do you want to have more spare time? Then bang, you can lead them into a trap. And it's so well known, there's actually a name for it. It's called mere agreement. Some people call it the yes momentum. Some people call it coming up with a yesable proposition. And this is used over and over again. It's a telemarketer that calls us on our phone late at night and says, would you like to make more money? I mean, you can't ask somebody a yes question without them knowing that it's leading into a trap. and something as little as, have you got a few minutes to talk? Which is the way almost everybody opens up their telephone conversations. You have to, here's what happens when you ask somebody, have you got a few minutes to talk? Here's what happens in the mind. Because if I hear that on the other end of the phone, my first thought is, if I have a few minutes to talk, do I want to talk to you? And then, if I have a few minutes to talk and I want to talk to you, do I want to talk about what you want to talk about? And the classic example of that is, there's not a man alive on a planet, and probably many women have gone through the same thing. They get the phone call from the most important person in their life, their significant other, their spouse, their life partner. They pick up the phone, and she or he says, can we talk? And our reaction is, all right, so I like talking to you, but somehow I know I don't want to talk about what you want to talk about. And I'll tell you something else, that can we talk? That question every single time when the other person is trying to get you to say yes, is the person saying is, I talk, you listen. I get things I want to say to you, and all I want to hear out of your mouth is yes. So that this happens to everybody around the planet, and we're hammered by yes. We're beaten by yes. And we're taken hostage by it. We become battered children as a result of yes. And if you look around, even the most innocent attempt to confirm yes, we always know it's leading someplace. One of my students at USC is trying to negotiate a deal for his honeymoon. And he wants to go to a resort in the off season, and he knows that in the off season they're offering discounts in the regular rooms, but they're not offering discounts on the bungalows, and he knows the bungalows are empty. So he gets on the phone with the manager of the resort, and really the only thing he's trying to do, he's trying to confirm what month it is. Something as innocent as confirming the time, the day, the location, a date on the calendar. He's only trying to get the manager to confirm something that's inarguably true. What time of the year is it? And he says to the manager, all right, so when we want to come out, it's the off season, right? Now the manager knows this is going someplace. And even something as innocent as confirming the fact of what time of the year it is, the manager starts to get defensive because he knows that's going someplace. And so while we love to hear yes on one end, that's this whole dual nature of yes, the Jekyll and Hyde of yes, if you will. We love it on hearing it, and on the other hand, we know as soon as somebody's starting to try to get it out of us, it's leading into a trap. Even something as simple as, what time of the year is it? We know somebody's got a trap. And so as a hostage negotiator, we didn't even bother with that. We came to know that yes is fleeting. We got used to the counterfeit yes. Because like I said before, since so many people are trying to lure us into commitment yes with confirmation yes, people get really good at the counterfeit yes. And a hostage negotiator, if we get a counterfeit yes from a bad guy, we know that's going bad. The consequences are not that the project doesn't get done like it is at work, or the consequences in your personal life are not that your significant other just simply doesn't show up at the time they said they would, or doesn't turn off the TV, or doesn't let you watch the channel. Consequences for a hostage negotiator of a counterfeit yes are disastrous. So we don't even bother with it. So you might ask yourself, if you're not bothering with a yes, all right, so Mr. Big Shot hostage negotiator, you think you're so smart, you're not trying to get yes. What is it that you're trying to get? What is it that matters more than yes? What is it that transforms any negotiation? And I'll give you a couple of things that make the difference in what the game changers are. But if yes isn't success, one of the dynamics that the problem is with yes, I'll let you know on a little bit of insider secret. No is one of those things that you want to hear. And here's why. Yes is commitment and no is protection. Yes is commitment and no is protection. So if you're getting ready to say yes to something and you're worried about what you're committing yourself to, and you're actually distracting yourself. That's when people stop listening because they're saying, where's this going? What is this committing myself to? I had a conversation recently with my girlfriend. Her fashion sense is 10 times mine. She's got amazing fashion sense. I put on a shirt, you know, if it covers me up, it doesn't have holes in it, I'm happy. You know, I probably wear stripes with plaids if I didn't know any better. So I rely upon her to tell me whether or not a shirt I'm wearing looks good. And I got a shirt in my closet. I threw it on the other day, and I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to keep it. And as soon as I put it on, we go out. She says, "Oh, I really like that shirt." So I'm like, "Okay, yeah, 2 thumbs up on a shirt. I now know this is. I'm going to hang on to this, and I'm not going to get rid of it." So later
She just
that
doesn't
day,
let you wear that Moses bathrobe, right?
she's been trying to get me out of the Moses bathrobe. That's actually, and I'm willing to admit, I have that bathrobe in multiple colors. I'm not a boring guy, you know, but the same bathrobe, different, you know, one's burgundy, another one is cornflower blue, as they say. What was that? That was the line from Fight Club. That anyway, we digress there. But yeah, she's been trying to get me out of the bathroom. So later in the day, I double check on a shirt and I say to her, "So you like this shirt, right?" And she literally says to me, "If I say yes, what am I committing to?"
You've trained her well.
Well, that's the problem with dating a hostage negotiator. You never know where the guy's coming from, right? So if you were worried about what happens when we say yes, we're, like she said, you know, what am I committing myself to? When we say no, we protect ourselves. No is protection. And even though we think we hate hearing no, as soon as somebody says no, they're actually more willing to listen because they've just protected themselves. I can't tell you the number of times my 17-year-old son started out a conversation with me with, "Dad, can I?" And I'd say no before he even finished the sentence. And then as soon as I said no, since I felt protected, I would say, "All right, so what is it that you wanted?" You know, now I was willing to listen, having already said no and protected myself. And I'll go back and I'll tell everybody out there listening, when I call somebody on the phone, I never say, "Have you got a few minutes to talk?" Nobody that I works for ever says, "Have you got a few minutes to talk?" What we say is now a bad time? And the person on the other, we only get 2 answers to "is now a bad time." The person will hesitate for a second and they'll say, no, it's never a bad time. What do you got? Or they'll say, "You know, it is, but I can talk at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon." They'll give us a time, specific time. In either case, I either now have that person's full attention and they're listening because they feel protected, or I've scheduled a time when I have their full attention. And I have a client the other day told us the one that they like to think of their own no way to start a conversation. How can I start the conversation with no? And they like to say, are you in the middle of something? And I love that one because even if they are in the middle of something, for them to say no to that, they have to shut that down and completely focus on you. So you can catch somebody in the middle of something, and if you say, "Are you in the middle of something?" you'll pull them right out of it. And I had another great response to a no question, because earlier this week I was lucky enough to be on a panel with Constance Schwartz, who's a co-founder of Smack Entertainment with Michael Strahan, the famous football player from the New York Giants and the Hall of Fame, a professional football player. And she is a superstar as a business person, not just a businesswoman, but as a business person. And she started her career as a woman working for the NFL 20 years ago. Now, if you think the NFL is a boys' club today, imagine what it was like 20 years ago. And her's a woman working in the middle of this boys' club, and they weren't even talking about glass ceilings then. You know, 20 years ago they were talking about whether or not women should have certain jobs at all, let alone how far they could get. And she realizes she's being held back from some things in the NFL. And she marches into her boss's office and says, "Are you not giving me these assignments because I'm a woman?" Now, there is no way that he's ever going to say yes to that, even if it's true. So he says no. And now the problem is, it's just like, have I caught you in the middle of something? When he says no to that, he now closes off the possibility that that's what he was doing subconsciously. And his ego is now invested in that no, and he has to follow it up. And she asked him a couple more questions about the assignment that she wanted, which was actually, it had to do with being on the sidelines in NFL games. And if you've watched any NFL games, when the players roll out of bounds, every now and then they smack into somebody that's standing on the sidelines who's part of the officiating crew or part of the media, and they were scared to death that she was going to get crushed by a monstrous NFL player, and they were never going to be able to defend themselves from letting a woman get mashed by an NFL player. And that's what they told her. And she said, you know what, if that happens, that's on me. But she triggered all of that by getting no as an answer instead of yes. And she had an instinct for that. And since no is protection, you'll be stunned at what people are willing to say no to. I've coached people in job negotiations to say, do you want me to fail? Or do you want the person that takes this position to fail? I mean, you'll be stunned at what people are willing to say no to, because no is protection and it clarifies thought. But that's not all. That's not all. What more is there? You know, it sounds like one of those television commercials. You know, that's not all. Here's where you really want to go. When you really want to transform a negotiation, the two words that transform every negotiation more than others is, what you have to do is you summarize the other person's thoughts and feelings so well that when you completely say everything that they're thinking and what they're feeling about it, there's only one thing they can say. And the only answer they can possibly come up with is, that's right. And while, you know, those of you that are hearing me talk for the first time, or those of you that are tuned into this webinar and hearing these ideas, when I told you that just now, you didn't feel a light bulb come on. You didn't feel that epiphany moment, because we're talking about strategy. But that's exactly what happens when someone has had a summary of what they're thinking given to them in such a way that their only answer is, that's right. We call that an epiphany moment. And it's, you know, on the slide, I've got Carl Rogers underneath this. This originally comes, I didn't make this up myself. You know, I like to think that I've learned from some ridiculously smart people. And all of this is an outgrowth from some thinking from a guy named Carl Rogers, who was a psychologist in the 70s, that really brought all these ideas to the forefront in triggering breakthroughs with people. He started this out as just in people's behavior, how to trigger a breakthrough, how do I do things that transform people's behavior. And he came up with the idea is that, you know, you summarize it so much that they actually think that you can read their mind. And think about any time you've been watching TV, you know, maybe you watched the debates last night, and whether you're a Trump fan or whether you're a Hillary fan, when one of your candidates really hit the nail on the head last night and said what you were thinking and feeling about the situation, what you did was you pointed at the TV and you said, that's right. You know, that's what you say when what someone has just said is the complete truth. You blessed it as a complete and utter truth, and you're willing to embrace it. And you say, that's right. And that's the key. You've triggered an epiphany moment in the other side. And the other thing that I found out about this too, and we've discovered, hostage negotiators have discovered, when someone you're talking to looks at you and says, that's right to you, they're just confirming to you they feel empathy from you. Bang. The bridge was just built. And I like to think of myself as, you know, I say I want a skill that missionaries and mercenaries are both happy with. So I'm not sure if I'm a compassionate mercenary or whether I'm a practical missionary. I like communication skills. My first question is, do they work? That's the missionary in me. Let's set the morality of it off to the side to begin with. I just want to know what works. And if I know what works, then the second question is, what's the morality of it? And that's when I decide whether or not I want to use it. I need to know whether or not it works because I got to be conscious of what's being used on me. I need to know what the manipulative people out there are doing to me so that I'm smarter. I'm smarter today than I was yesterday. I have a friend of mine that likes to say, I reserve the right to be smarter today than I was yesterday. I want to be smarter today than I was yesterday. So I need to know what the sociopaths are using that I won't see coming, the stealth communication secrets, the stealth weapons of sociopaths, if you will. So I want to know what they're using because it works. And if it's a tool of choice by a sociopath, then I know it works because they don't care. They have no morality. All they care about is what works. And interestingly enough, the guy who coined the phrase emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman, his recent book, Focus, he talks about the 3 kinds of empathy. And one of them he calls cognitive empathy, and he just out and out states that's what sociopaths are best at. And why do they use it? Because it works. So now my secondary question is, as a missionary, as a decent human being, as somebody who cares about the morality of it, as somebody who actually cares about my fellow man, can I use this in good conscience? And if the answer is yes, then I say that's right. I can use it in good conscience. And that's what this is about. This came from Carl Rogers, who was a guy who cared about human beings and what's better for our relationships and what helps people think at the same time. So we're going for a that's right. And if you get a that's right out of somebody, the phrase, never be so sure of what you want in a negotiation that you wouldn't take something better. What's this about? This is about how to get something better. Because you need the other side to throw something on the table that was better than what you imagined. And you need them to be happy about it. Because that's when the deal is made. Not when you agree, but when it's implemented. So let me contrast this to what most of us would rather hear, and it's worse. So what is possible that we would rather hear that would be worse? Well, what we'd rather hear and what's worse is you're right. We may like you're right more than we like that's right. And the unfortunate truth of you're right is it's what everybody says with someone we're trying to maintain a relationship with, either because we work with them or for them and we can't get away from them. We're actually their hostage at work every day. With somebody we care about. And we want them to be happy, and we just want them to shut up. We want to hurt their feelings. We just want them to, please, won't you just shut up. And since we can't say that to them because we got to maintain a relationship with them, we look at them and we say, you're right. And they're happy. You could just watch people's faces light up when you look them in the eye and you say, you're right. And they get so pleased. And what they do is there's someone who won't let up on us. And when we say, you're right, they smile and they let up and they shut up and they go away. And this is, we're trapped by this so often. And I'm at a dinner the other night, and I'm sitting next to the CEO of a company and they communicate for a living. And he's actually a former military interrogator, so he understands the ins and outs of communication. And he told me this story. He never knew how he was lured in by you're right. And he said he was mad at all his senior executives, and he called them all into a room. And he was kind of laying down the law, if you will, because he didn't feel that they all understood. And in the middle of laying down the law and providing us new directions, one of his executives looked at him and said, Tim, you're right. And it stopped him dead in his tracks, because he realized at that moment that when somebody says you're right to you, not only you're on the wrong track, but you've been on the wrong track for a while. And God bless him, to his credit, he stopped the meeting right then and there and said, if I'm in a position where the people who are under me just want me to shut up, then I need to recalibrate my entire direction of where I'm coming from, because none of what I want to have happen right now is going to happen. And he took a step back. He stopped the meeting. He went back. He took another look at his approach. He talked to people. individually, and he got everybody on the right sheet of music. He knew what a horrible trap your right is. And let me roll some of this through so you can see it. Your right is false agreement. When somebody says you're right, look around in your workplace today. I'll give you an action item for today after today's webinar. Just look around in your workplace or in your personal life and look for two people that are talking. One of them is talking passionately, and I promise you the other person is leaning back saying, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. And you can just see the imaginary hand coming up, trying to get distance between the two of them. You'll see people trying to get distance between them and the person that's talking to them when they say you're right. It's false agreement. It's people saying, go away now, please, in as polite as terms as they can possibly say, either because they love the person, they care about them, or they're handcuffed to them at work. They've been taken hostage by them. And it's also is, I really don't agree. I'm just tired of arguing. And whatever you think I've agreed to, that first chance I get, the first excuse I can come up with to not go along with this, I'm going to back out. And that's why so many of our agreements don't get implemented. That's why we're confused at the conversation we had yesterday. Where is it? What happened to the agreement that I thought I had yesterday? This puts us on a gerbil wheel of recurring conversations. Now here's what happens when somebody says that's right. You've just triggered a breakthrough with the other person. They have taken what you said and they pronounced it as the truth. And since it's the truth, not your truth, because your right is saying like, well, all right, that's your truth. I don't agree, and that's why I'm using the word you to keep distance between the two of us. But that's right, they've said that what they've just heard is the truth. And they have actually felt a subtle epiphany. I've taken, I was in a conversation just a couple months ago, and somebody was giving me some advice on an issue, and through the course of this conversation, I knew that they were listening to me so well and how I felt about the situation that they were going to get a that's right out of me, particularly because they respected how I felt and they were just talking about it from my point of view. And I saw it coming, and I'm kind of fascinated by this because I always try to...
Muted.
When I said that's right, I literally felt better inside. I was kind of amazed by it because I could see it coming, and it was the first time that I'd ever had taken the time to feel an epiphany coming at me, and it made me feel good. I got to tell you something. When I felt that happen, I really felt good about it, and I was so appreciative of the person that had walked me into that. It just, I can't completely explain, but I don't get the opportunity to feel empathy from somebody and notice that I felt empathy from another person, and it just made me feel great about the way that we were interacting with each other. And so, to me, it was a breakthrough moment. So we've used this in everything from a kidnapping in the Philippines to a pharmaceutical saleswoman trying to make sales of a new pharmaceutical to a doctor and triggered these epiphany moments. This originally came from a kidnapping. The first time that I really used it in a kidnapping in the Philippines is as an American named Jeffrey Schilling got grabbed in the Philippines. And the bad guys, the terrorists, the hostages, the kidnappers, was an Al-Qaeda affiliated group in the south of the Philippines called the Abu Sayyaf. And these are some bad guys. These are the guys you see in the movies. These are the guys with AK-47s going into villages, shooting people at random, sexually assaulting the women, grabbing men, walking them out into the town square, chopping their heads off. These are bad guys. These are murdering, raping, killers in the jungle. And they've got this American named Jeffrey Schilling, and they want $10 million for this guy. And they think they can get it. And they've got an open demand to the United States government of $10 million for Jeffrey Schilling, but they don't want it for ransom. the guy who's the leader of their group, the sunglasses wearing, bandana, black t-shirt wearing, in love with himself, sociopathic bad guy named Sabaya, wants $10 million for Jeff Schilling because of 500 years of repression in the south of the Philippines. You know, you don't get a terrorist group marauding through the streets in Yonkers, New York. You get a terrorist group marauding through the jungle in a developing world because there have been bad stuff happening in that part of the world for the last 500 years. And these guys in the south of the Philippines, one colonial power after another has marauded through this part of the world, from the Spanish to the Japanese to the Americans, and really kind of taken advantage of the region. So this guy saying like, all right, so for 500 years of oppression, we want $10 million. And it's because of the injustices and the wrongs. And we're going back and forth with these guys. I'm coaching a negotiator. I'm not doing the negotiations. As the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator, you know, you might ask, how many languages does this guy Chris Voss speak? Well, I want to tell you something. If you haven't noticed in the conversation so far, I barely speak one. You know, I have trouble with English, as it were, so I don't speak any other languages. So I coach people in different countries. And I got a guy, and I'm coaching him in his negotiation with Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines. And I say, here's what we're going to do. With our bad guy, we got one goal. We're 4 months into this case, and we can't get him to budge off this 10 mil for Jeff Schilling. And here's what we're going to do today. We're going to get a that's right out of our bad guy. That's it. All we're going to do today, we're not going to argue. We're not going to say, what has an American got to do with what the Spanish did 500 years ago? We're not going to say, what has an American got to do with what the Japanese did in World War II? All we're going to do is we're going to repeat everything this guy has said and how he's felt about the injustices and the economic damage and all this nonsense that he's thrown out. Because when you're in a negotiation, does the other side come up with something that's reasonable? No. They always put all kinds of extra nonsense into it as an excuse for what they're doing when they're not complying. If people were reasonable in negotiations, we would never have disagreements. If reason ruled the world, it would be easy to work things out. If reason ruled the world, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton would have been in a debate last night, and every couple minutes one of them would have looked at the other and said, wow, that's a really good point. That makes a lot of sense. That's what would happen if reason ruled the world. Since reason does not rule the world, we had what we had in a presidential debate last night, and that's human nature across the planet. So instead of getting a you're right out of somebody, we're putting heavy-duty pressure. I coach my negotiators, summarize all this nonsense this guy is saying, and our goal is to get a that's right out of him. 2 days later, my guy gets on the phone with the bad guy, and he says, you know, you're not asking for a ransom. You're asking for war damages for 500 years of oppression, from the Spanish to the Japanese to the Americans, to the violations of the fishing rights, to the injustices that have been done in the south of the Philippines. And not only that, you guys aren't Filipinos, but you're Moros. You're your own ethnic group. You're not even Filipinos. And the moral sovereignty has not been respected. And you guys have been harmed. And he got done summarizing everything that our knucklehead terrorist had said. And this killer, this sociopath, this murderer goes silent for a few moments, and he says, that's right. So why don't we talk again in a couple of days? And my guy says, okay, we'll talk in a couple of days. And they hang up the phone. And the $10 million ransom demand disappeared in that moment. We went from $10 million to zero in one conversation. Now, you might ask yourself, is that what this guy Voss expected? I will tell you, I was surprised by that. All I thought it was going to do, because what I'm used to that's right doing is simply getting rid of the nonsense from the other side and bringing them down to their real point. And I didn't know in this case that it was all nonsense. And when we got rid of all the nonsense in the other side's position, I thought we were going to get to the core. There was no core there. So what happened in the case, we went back and forth for a couple more months. The bad guys really kind of lost their way. They lost their way. They got so unorganized, and they didn't know we did it to them, that they actually stopped keeping track of Jeffrey Schilling. Our American is being held hostage in the jungle. They've actually got him in a mangrove swamp. He realizes they're not even around anymore. Somebody comes and checks on him every few days and finally says to himself, what am I doing here? I can walk away. He slipped out of his chains. He's lost so much weight. You know, he slipped right out of his chains, and he walked away. He walks away. The military comes down and picks him up. Farmer sees him, calls the military, and we fly him out of the Philippines. And back in the Philippines, 3 weeks later, I'm back with my guy that I've been coaching, and he says to me, you are not going to believe who called me on the phone. I'm like, all right, you know, I don't know, because my guy's got an undercover name, and he's still got his undercover phone. The terrorist actually still has his phone number. Our murder and rape and sociopathic killer terrorist calls my guy on the phone, and he says, have you been promoted yet? I have no idea what you said to me on the phone. Whatever it was, it worked. You're really good. They should promote you. He hangs up the phone. That's where you want to leave people after your interactions. Even when they know you've won, they don't feel beaten. They don't resent it. They still feel connected to you. They feel respected by you. And what my bad guy was really telling my good guy in that case was, when we meet again, I'll talk. If we meet again, I respect how you handle yourself enough that under any circumstances, I'll still deal with you. And that's the way you want to leave everybody in a negotiation. Even if you don't get your way, you want them to feel respected so that they'll still talk to you. I gave this training session to some security guys with an oil company. And they said, look, we need you to give us business negotiation, but because we're in security, we can't pay for business negotiation. So I want you to give us business negotiation disguised as hostage negotiation. We'll pay you for hostage negotiation. What do you got? And I said, I got that's right. Let me lay it out for you guys, and you'll be able to use it in all of your negotiations, especially your internal negotiations with other executives. I teach them it. They love it. They call me back down to their headquarters in Houston a couple months later, and one of the guys from the previous training in Peru shows up, and he says, I can't wait to tell you what happened. I was on the phone with my ex-girlfriend, and she got a that's right out of me. And when she did it, I realized what happened, and I was good with it, and I'm still good with it. And that's the way you want to leave with people that you've interacted with. You want them to be good with it in the moment, and when they look back on it, they want to say to themselves, I'm still good with it. And that's the key phrase to get. That's the way you want. That's the key to long-term relationships. That's the key to coworkers that want to continue to work with you and see things your way after you've gotten a that's right out of them. And that's how you have people in your personal life who matter to you and who you want to have great long-term relationships with. So, you know, I've really focused on the that's right thing as a way to create bonds with people, if you will. I mean, do I want to bond with the people that I work with? Do I want to bond with my vendor who's supplying me with a service? You know what I do? I do want to have a great relationship with the people that I do business with. I don't want to be held hostage by that relationship, but I want to have a good, solid working relationship, because if the key to flexibility in a negotiation is not being so sure of what I want that I wouldn't take something better, that something better's got to come from the other side. And I know they're most likely to tell me what that something better is when I've gotten a that's right out of them. And somebody that said in one of my talks that I gave just a couple months ago, she sent me this email because she called it a Jedi mind trick. And it's not, although it feels like it. These are not the droids that you were looking for. it feels like it. And she said she was ready to give in this negotiation with a new client. She's an attorney. No, actually, this woman is in advertising. And she was trying to bring in a new client, and they're in a price negotiation, and she was normally when she would have met in the middle. You know, the name of my negotiation book is Never Split the Difference, which is, you know, another way of saying let's meet in the middle, which is a bad idea. And she was at the moment when she would normally have met in the middle. You know, let's go halfway between what I want and she wants. Instead, she summarizes her potential client's position and try to get a that's right out of her. And she said, instead of giving in, let me get a that's right. And as soon as she did, she shut up. She used the effective pause. She let the other person feel the silence. She let silence work for her. And her client looked at her and proposed exactly what she wanted. So yeah, that's when she got to say to the other person, you're right. Because the other person proposed something she wanted to go along with, and she was trying to seal the other person's compliance with you know, flipping this on its other side. So this is powerful stuff. I mean, I want to have an impact with everybody that's listening today. I want everybody that's listening to this to do better in their negotiations. I want you to have a better life. I want you to have better relationships. I want you to have more time in your life. I want to have an impact with you. And this is the way that I can help you have an impact in your life and have better things happen for you. So as we're getting ready, I think, how's our timing look, ladies? Where are we at on time?
We're 12 minutes out, Chris.
We do a little Q&A here, can we?
Sure.
All right. Anybody want to know anything other than what is my accent from?
Well, Chris, this is amazing. You know, what I would like to know as far as trying to get the that's right statement, how important is how you say it so much as what you say?
You know, I'm so glad you brought that up. That is huge because it completely changes the meaning. You know, there's some data out there that indicates, I've seen a number of different things that indicates that how we say something is 5 times more important than what we say. So, when, for example, if I say to you, you know, that was a really good question, or I could say that was a really good question. Like the first one with my tone of voice shows you that I admire the insight of that question. It's thought-provoking. It's worth talking about. I take the exact same words and change my tone of voice, and it sounds like I think that was a stupid question. So how you say it is enormously important. I can get away with saying almost anything. For me, I like to say I like to use a deferential tone of voice. There's great power in deference. With deference, it's unbelievable the things that you can get away with saying. Deference is a combination of the late night FM DJ voice with respect thrown in. And in my tense negotiations, I mean, I use the heck out of deference to get my way. And then the add-in on that is, if I really want you to cooperate with me, then I'm going to change my tone of voice so that it indicates I really like talking with you. You know, you might like me, not like me, but that's not going to stop me from liking you. And, you know, right now, I'm smiling, and you can hear the smile in my voice, and you can feel it.
Yeah.
And actually what's happening is I know that's triggering a part of your brain that's making you feel better. So I use that to my advantage also. Tone of voice may actually be, well, it's 5 times more important than what you say. What you say is critical, and the crafting and the selection of the words is critical, but, you know, how you say it is 5 times more important, and I'll stick to that.
That's great. We have a couple more questions coming in from the audience, too. Doug would like to know, what do you recommend when someone responds to you with the "you're right"? Like, what do you recommend to, how should someone respond when you get the "you're right" from someone?
All right, you can do one of two things, and that's a great question. I like that question. What do you do if you find yourself having stepped on that landmine and having your right blown up in bits and pieces all over you. You could say that's the moment for you to hesitate and say, you know, I probably haven't been hearing you. I probably haven't been listening to you. I feel now that somehow I'm off track. And then that's the point in time when you use the skill that I mentioned a moment ago, the effective pause. Go silent. Because if somebody says you're right to you, what they're also telling you is they don't feel heard. And take a moment and give them the opportunity to fill that space. What's probably going to happen is you're going to need another conversation after this one. And what you want to do at that moment of having heard your right is you need to seed the next conversation. And you seed it by saying, you know, I'm probably not hearing you. And when you use that effective pause, if they don't step into that and open up a little bit, since they've been trying to get you to shut up, they need to regroup themselves a little bit, so you give them that seed of, I'm going to listen to you next time we talk, and take a few minutes. I don't know if you need to go get a cup of coffee or you need to talk the next day, but take a step back, see if you can get them to step forward. And if they can't, just agree to talk again where you're going to listen. And I think that'll get you out of that.
That's great. James would like to know, how can you move a negotiation process further along when one side has really dug in on their position? What suggestions would you give?
Well, James, this is where I'm reiterating. When the other side is dug in, you got to get a that's right out of them, and you dig them out by expressing their perspective. And I'll tell the quick story with the pharmaceutical saleswoman, because she's trying to sell a hot new drug to a doctor who's dug in at saying no. Now she's been he's on her territory, so she sold other stuff to him, but in trying to hustle this new drug that they have, and if it's their latest drug, then it's their most profitable. It's not being knocked off yet. There aren't generics yet. It's enormously profitable, and this doctor's not buying it. He's dug in at not buying the drug. So what she does is she goes out and she sets an appointment with him, and she's going to get a that's right out of him because he's so dug in. And what she does is she almost sounds like she's talking to him in his position. She says, you're not going to buy this from me because it's our hottest new drug. You care about your patients more than that. Your patients are people to you, and you feel responsible for their lives. And you're just not buying the most profitable drug from pharmaceutical salesperson because they make the most money off of it. Your patients are more important to you than that. And it sounds like she's trying to talk him into not buying, right? She's giving him all the reasons why he's not buying. And she said he turned and looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time, and he said, that's right. When someone's dug in, they need to feel so respected instead of cornered that you can get them to walk out of that hole on their own. And that's what that's right's all about, getting somebody out of a dug-in position.
That's great. You know, Jessica has another question. She would actually like you to recap on why hearing no is better in a negotiating process than hearing yes.
All right, Jessica, I like that question. All right, so yes is commitment, which then we think to ourselves, what are we letting ourselves in for? It creates anxiety. People are scared to say yes because they want to know what they're letting themselves in for. Even it was when my girlfriend was committing to that she liked the shirt. I mean, as ridiculous it is, yes creates anxiety because we don't know what we've let ourselves in for. The opposite is true. No is protection. When we say no, we protected ourselves. Dad, can I? No, you can't. I know. What was it that you wanted? When we protect ourselves with the word no, we actually have centered ourselves. We're not worried. We just created great defenses around ourselves, and because of that, we're now more willing to listen. There's no anxiety, and when there's no anxiety, we listen more. As a matter of fact, we, at that point in time, having said no, we wonder what we might be missing out on, which makes us even more curious about what's coming. So you'll be stunned at what people are willing to say no to. Do you want to fail? Do you want me to fail? Do you want to leave money on the table? No is protection. And I can say no to these things, and I feel protected, and I'm more ready to proceed forward having felt protected. So those are the two differences. Yes creates anxiety, no creates security. So with the feeling of security, people are more willing to listen.
Great. Thank you. We have another really great question from Leanna. She says, are there ways to negotiate according to your personality strength? In other words, would it look different for a conscientious personality or a dominant personality or more emotional versus logic? I guess she's saying, how does this fit in with your own personality strengths?
All right, here's what I love about that question, because that kind of hits on each one of the types of personalities there are. There's a highly analytical, there's a domineering personality, and then there's a relationship-oriented. These are our default types, our caveman types. You know, the part of the brain that the caveman had that's still there, the amygdala, has one of three responses to conflict, and it's fight, flight, and make friends. So each one of us has that as our default caveman, cavewoman type. To be a great negotiator, you need elements of all three. You need to make great relationships. You need to be able to push forward your agenda. And you need to do it in a way that preserves the relationship and thinks things through. So to that question is, whatever your personality type is, that's an essential component. I wouldn't want you to change it. I'd want you to add to it. Okay. So being naturally assertive is something that is not part. If you're relationship oriented, you probably need to be a little more assertive. If you think of yourself as an assertive, a direct person, if the word assertion excites you and you want to be assertive, well, what you need is you need to be better at relationships, because you can't assert without protecting the relationship, because then it becomes a threat. And if the phrase, you know, there's a lot of time here, we don't want to rush into things, you're an analytical person. If you think to yourself, we got to think this through because there are always going to be consequences. Well, I need you to work a little more on relationships also, and I need you to step forward a little bit sooner. So it's not changing, it's adding to. And I think you said Jessica asked that question?
Yes.
Jessica, whatever...
Oh, no, I'm sorry, that was Leanna that asked that one.
Leanna, whatever your natural inclination is, I'm here to tell you that natural inclination is essential, and I never want you to lose that. I want you to add to it. I want you to add to it.
Okay, we do have a few more questions, but we're going to run short on time, so I wanted to tell everyone that if your question is not answered during the program, Chris is going to get a copy of them, and he'll be able to answer them offline. Got time for one more. This one comes from Travis, and he says, in order to relate it to our business, being the recruiting and staffing business, it's often helpful to make this a game. How would you make a game to go for the no?
Well, all right, so the part of that I really like is, I like the idea of making it a game, because if it's a game, it's fun, and if it's fun, you're actually smarter. There's some really good data out there that indicates that if we're having fun, if we're in a positive frame of mind, our brain works up to 31% more effectively. That is no small leap. That is a huge move forward if you're having fun. And if you're having fun with people, then they're smarter also. So as long as the game is with people and not at their expense, then I like the idea of a game. And I want you to be delighted by getting people to say that's right. I want you to feel an enormous sense of accomplishment, because the other person's going to feel wonderful with that's right also. When you're triggering no's, now the only thing I don't want you to do is I don't want that to be the only thing you're triggering. No is the path to that's right. You get a couple of no's, you got to get a that's right. You can't get to wonderful places without getting that's right. So know that each time that you've gotten to know the other person feels protected, they're more willing to listen. but what are you really going to for is that's right. And so if you give yourself 1 point for every no you get, you should give yourself 10 points for every that's right you get, because it's probably 10 times more important. And I would offer it to you like that. I mean, look at it in those terms, please.
Okay. Well, Cindy, do you want to wrap things up? We have a few more questions that have floated in, but they'll have to be answered offline. And I just wanted to say thank you very much, Chris. This was outstanding.
I hope it was fun, too.
It was great, Chris. That was a really great presentation. Thank you so much. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This program was sponsored by SmartSearch Applicant Tracking System and is part of our series of best practice webinars as a value-added service to our users in the HR and recruiting community. At SmartSearch, we're committed to continuous product improvement, ongoing training, and to provide our users with the solutions and technologies they need to succeed in the ever-changing recruitment landscape. And part of that is to bring great presenters like Chris Voss to your attention. For additional info on today's topic, you can contact Chris directly or your SmartSearch representative if you have any questions or if we can be of further assistance. Thanks again, Chris. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Sylvia. Everyone have a great day.